Welcome to The General and the Journalist, our podcast from The Times and The Sunday Times about how the old order's shifting and conflicts on the rise. You're the journalist part of the equation, Tom Newton-Dunn.
And you're the General Sir Patrick Sarders. Well, it's been a huge week for the war in Ukraine, and one that could end up being pivotal in deciding its outcome, with President Trump finally getting off the fence to exert significant pressure on President Putin to bring the 3.5-year war to an end. And Ukraine is where we've been this week too. You and I, Patrick, have just got back from Kyiv via quite an epic 15-hour-long Soviet-era sleeper train, which was quite an experience, wasn't it?
It was quite an experience trying to get into a tiny couchette with your mountains of baggage, Tom. But I love trains, so it was a bit like a scene from Russia with Love, only without the attractive spy.
And without Bond and Ash having a massive fistfight in the carriage, it has to be said. Anyway, while we were in Kyiv, among quite a few other things that we did, we had an extremely long conversation with President Zelensky's Chief of Staff, Andriy Yermak. And that's a conversation we're going to bring to people today. Who is Andriy Yermak, for those who don't know him? Well, he's Volodymyr Zelensky's long-standing friend, his closest ally and advisor. And Yermak's also quite a controversial figure. He wields significant power in his own right. In fact, he was included in Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in the world last year, where very interestingly, Zelensky was not.
Yeah, Yermak is the second most powerful man in Ukraine. And in all the dealings I had as one of the defense chiefs on Ukraine, and actually all the discussions we had in Whitehall, Yermak's name was a constant reference point. And like him or not, he has been instrumental to Ukraine's survival throughout this war and to President Zelensky's political and diplomatic strategy as well. There is no doubt that he's a divisive figure. His political enemies call him an unelected chief minister in all but name. He controls allegedly 85% of the information that flows to the president, and he exercises enormous, some would say, disproportionate influence.
And beyond that conversation with Andriy Yermak that we'll share with you in a moment, it felt like a really crucial time to be in Ukraine this week, didn't it, Patrick?
Yeah, and of course, we're in the midst of Russia's summer offensive. So in the past 2 weeks, Russian forces have conducted some of the largest strikes of the war so far. Just on July the 8th, Russia launched some 741 drones and missiles. And while we were there, we could hear sirens blaring regularly day and night.
And a few crumps in the distance as also the explosions began to come into Kyiv one night, and we made for the air raid shelters. But far more significant than Russia's relentless battering of Ukraine's cities at the moment, with drones and ballistic missiles piling in, as horrific as they are, it was what President Trump did this week after 6 very long months in office of toing and froing, wasn't it? What he said.
Yeah, in the White House on Monday, alongside NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Trump said he is, and I quote, very, very unhappy with Russia for saying it wants peace, but consistently doing nothing about it. And Trump then went on to say that he's going to enforce very severe tariffs on Russia unless Putin agrees to a peace deal within, not 2 weeks, 50 days.
Yeah, 50 days is a long time. We'll get back to that. But what does he mean by significant tariffs? Well, he means secondary tariffs. In other words, 100% new tax on imports into the US from all the countries that still buy Russia's oil and gas. And that's basically China, India, and a bit of Iran. And if he went through with that, the Russian economy could well come under severe pressure if Putin didn't do a peace deal, simply because Putin would have no money left to fund the war.
And President Trump also agreed to significantly increase the flow of arms. Whether they're offensive or defensive is now cast into a little bit of confusion based on some comments, of course, he made in front of the White House this morning. But he's prepared to allow American weaponry to go to Ukraine via NATO and European countries as the middlemen. And critically, of course, this includes the Patriot air defense system, which Ukraine desperately needs if it's going to deal with those Russian strategic strikes.
Yeah. Okay, so where does Andriy Yermak come into all this? People might be wondering. Well, behind the scenes, he's been personally agitating for this very much hopeful pivot from Donald Trump throughout the past 6 months, ever since Trump came to office and before. He's also had to endure some fairly hard moments with his friend along the way. And I looked up the pictures, actually. You remember that appalling grilling that Zelensky got in the Oval Office from Trump and J.D. Vance back in February? No one will forget that. There was Andriy Yermak sitting right next to his friend Volodymyr Zelensky. He was silent throughout and had to take all of it.
A few days ago, we met Mr. Yermak in the conference room of the very highly protected presidential office building in central Kyiv. That's just a few floors above President Zelensky's own office. We had to go through multiple layers of security, electronic and physical checks to get there. I mean, I was impressed by the rigor of those checks that we went through. And unsurprisingly, I guess, because the Ukrainians, of course, take the security around President Zelensky and Yermak extraordinarily seriously.
Well, the Russians would like to kill both men. There's still no doubt about it, and they're still trying. But it was quite a place, wasn't it? The conference room we were in inside the presidential office, presidential palace, if you like. A huge bank of TV screens down one end of the room, taking up the entire wall. And on the opposite end, above the head of the table where Yermak was sitting during the interview, was this great big neon sign in the yellow and blue colors of Ukraine that read, "The Crisis Center of the President."
Yeah, so we spoke to him about how the war's going, how Ukraine's very, very tired people are doing, and perhaps most fascinating of all, whether he thinks President Trump's new plan to force a peace will work. So this is our conversation with Andriy Yermak.
A simple question to start. Is Ukraine winning or losing this war now?
Definitely not losing. Definitely. And this is important questions because, it's a very important that our friends and society in the West know the truth. Know the truth because more than 3 years of these full-scale invasions and 11 years of the war, Russia against Ukraine, it's long terms. And of course, sometimes, Russia propaganda, it's work very hardly. And better to say the numbers. You can see how many lost have Russia during just last 6-8 months. And they try to say that they have the big success in the front line. But by figures, just figures, they was able occupied not more than 0.3% of our territories during this period of time. And look to the price. This is absolutely give the answer what Ukraine not losing this war.
What is the price they're paying for that?
The price, it's a huge numbers of the people which they lost. Of course, we have different philosophy. For us, just one life, it's important and means. For Russians, not. Nobody in Russia know the real numbers of the lost. And I can just give you one examples. During the consultations in Istanbul, we decided to exchange what is great, the prisoners of war. But in the same time, we decided to exchange of the bodies of the killed soldiers of both parts. And what I can say, that when you received, it's necessary always it's go through some DNA test, the expertise. And what we found already, we found dozens of Russians, which Russia side gave to us and tried to make that it look like they back Ukrainians.
So with this level of losses, I mean, we know that in Afghanistan, it only took 15,000 casualties before, under the Soviet Union, there was a general rejection of the war. Now Russia has taken over 1 million casualties, possibly 250,000 of those have been killed. At what point does that begin to catch up with Putin and his regime? When do the Russian people say enough?
I'm afraid they so try to not make this information open that just financial problems of the economy will be really press to Putin, and he will recognize that it's too expensive to him to continue this war. Unfortunately, all this year, the situation in economy, the price to the oil, gave him opportunity to finance this military machine. Why these new sanctions? New sanctions from United States and uh, the new sanctions from Europe and other countries so important. And it's great that now these new packages, it's synchronized between each other, and we hope that it will be really very painful and very, very concentrated, because our analysis about these new packages, that it's what was great, that it will be work immediately.
Going back to the numbers, you know how many Ukrainian soldiers you've lost. You won't declare them necessarily publicly. We understand why. You have a rough idea of how many Russians you're killing, and there are independent calculations. The Economist, for example, thinks that 31,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in the last 2 months, the summer offensive alone. Do you know what ratio the current fatalities are? How many dying compared to how many Ukrainians?
I think what I know from our military, it's one Ukrainians to 2-3 of the Russians.
2 or 3?
Yeah.
Is that the highest of the war so far?
Again, it's the different philosophy, because, the Russians regime, it's not about the people. It's not about humanity. And it's mean that because Russia, it's not democracy country, all the media, it's controlled and everything limited. I think it's a very difficult for the ordinary Russians to get this information. We know that still the lot of the families, it still think that their husband, their sons, it's in life and continue to fighting, but they already killed. And when you ask about the exactly number, it's again difficult, because for them it's not the priority.
Yeah, but Tom, body count is a terrible way of judging whether or not a campaign is doing successfully. And as Mr. Yermak's been saying, it doesn't appear to be having an effect on Russian popular will at the moment, because the casualties are being hidden. But wars are ultimately decided by will. Which side has more determination, which one can see it through. When you measure Ukrainian will, which we have all admired, against Russian will, do you see a point where Russian will collapses? Because it has in the past. We know there are historical examples.
They have not good, I think, emotional situation in the society, because Moscow and St. Petersburg, it's not all the Russia. And but this culture of the dictator and for pressing of the opposition, it's too long in Russia. It's mean that I think that only economy, the first place, I mean sanctions, and the second, of course, the continue to surprise our enemy and continue to surprise the world, but by some very successful operations, which now famous in the world. This is our way. Plus, today Ukrainian drones change the rules of the war in the 21st century.
Operation Spider's Web.
Yes.
I think that's what you're talking to, that brilliant operation to destroy those Russian strategic bombers deep inside Russia. You obviously knew about it for some time in advance, as did President Zelensky. How important was it for the world to see that you could hit back really hard against Russia and really hurt and infuriate Putin?
First of all, it's very important for us, for Ukrainian people, because you now hear and you personally can listen the sirens, and you can imagine if it's happened every day, several times every night, the people didn't sleep enough. And of course, it's very important that they can see we still able to fight, we still able to defend our country. And the second, it's a very important for our friends and partners, because Kursk operations, this operation which we discussed, it's confirmed the attitude, because again, time, all the people in the world have their domestic problem, domestic questions, but when it's happened such big success, and happened by what is a very important, all this operation was made by Ukrainian drones, which we produced during this war, what is incredible. And this is it's strengthening the faith and the strengthening the supporting by our friends and partners. And of course, in the end, it's important because the enemy can see that they will receive the answer for any operations against Ukrainian city, against Ukrainian civilians, for any moderates of the Ukrainians, they will be answered.
You've shown with Spider's Web and other operations as well targeting Russian generals, you can hit them very hard right in their heartlands in Moscow, St. Petersburg. Would you target President Putin if you could? Is President Putin a legitimate target?
You know, first of all, it's, you understand, you're professionals. It will be not smart from my side to discuss such kind of any of operations before it's happened. But what I can say that now for us, the targets, it's a military object.
One final question on the Operation Spider's Web. You had Putin, the Russian Federation, retaliating, in their words, with massive aerial bombardments of your city. In Kyiv Wednesday night, in Lviv last night. It goes back for a month or so. Nobody is sleeping. This is very, very hard on the population. They are having an effect, aren't they? They are slowly exhausting your air defense missiles. You have a limited supply of these.
It's a strategy, but again, compare. You have absolutely the same during the Second World War. And you can compare what happens with Nazis bombed the London. And but if it's break the faith and the braveness of the British people, no. If it's breaking the braveness and your leadership of Churchill and others, no. We have not another land. We have not another country. We have not another. We are fighting for our families, for our children. It's mean that, yes, it's difficult. Yes, it's true. But if you go to the street of the Kyiv and ask to the people, do you tired? Of course, everybody said, yes, we're tired. And you ask the second questions, do you ready to take the ultimatum, and for you doesn't matter how to end this war? The people said, no, definitely no, we're not tired.
Yeah. So let's take a step back from the current situation and just, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Ukraine's strategy. So you just mentioned Winston Churchill, and in May 1940, and you'll remember this speech, I think your president has quoted it, Churchill said, "You ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word, it is victory." You've said the same. You've said that victory is your aim. What does victory look like for Ukraine?
I can also give you the phrase of another very famous politic of Great Britain. It's Margaret Thatcher. She said that you never can achieve the peace if you show weakness. I fully agree. You know, for us, the victory, of course, the global victory, the victory, what if you ask when Ukraine can say that really war is ended and we restore the peace, and we can think about any relations with this now terrorist state, Russia, everything described in 10 points of President Zelensky in peace formula. But we are realistic people. We understand that it's a long way. Now, if we are talking about victory and the peace, it's lasting and just peace, which will be secured. And of course, it's about our territorial integrity. Of course, it's about our sovereignty. But we understand that it's impossible in one moment to back all our territories. But we need to start. And this start, it's already a lot of times was declared by President. It's immediate, unconditional ceasefire. It's backing of all Ukrainians and prisoners of war and children and civilians. And of course, President said that he is ready for negotiations, but real negotiations, not games. Because what we saw, it's games. It's games to try to make a show and continue to lie. Because just the leaders of the world now recognize that Putin don't want to stop this war.
So that your strategy has evolved from survival 3 years ago through the sort of pendulum of offensives and counteroffensives, and then most recently positioning yourselves to be bargaining from a position of strength in any negotiations. But those negotiations, as you say, now look incredibly unlikely. I mean, there are discussions, aren't there, between Rubio and Lavrov in Malaysia, but at the moment it looks very unlikely that those negotiations are going to happen. So if we are into a war where Russia doesn't stop, where they continue this war, what's Ukraine's theory of victory? What's your winning strategy to deliver a Ukraine that can survive under these conditions, and not just survive, but thrive and neutralize Russian strength?
Look, first of all, we stabilize front line. And we're working on it. And our military, it's do the best, but you know that it's necessary some additional things and continuing of the support. And the second, it's to maximum strengthening for any potential negotiations. It means that we need to be in the strong positions. One I mentioned, we are work 24 hours, 7 days to increasing our own productions. We are very successful with our partners to create a new joint ventures, to decide it's great that we work with the Nordic countries and Great Britain and United States and Germany and many others. Next, it's of course to keep this unity around Ukraine. It's best scenario then we need to keep and Europe and United States. It's extremely important for us. And this is great. I was present in the last phone call between President Zelensky and President Trump. It was a great phone call.
When was that?
It was 4th of July. And they speaking in one languages. I can't explain a lot of details of this, but I can say it was very constructive, very productive conversations. And this is our strategy. You know, we always, during this war, we are very proactive. We're very creative. And we still able to surprise the world.
The relationship between Ukraine and the US, President Zelensky and President Trump, It feels a world away from the Oval Office. I'm sure you were there when President Zelensky was humiliated by President Trump and J.D. Vance. Yet last week, Donald Trump, he reversed the hold on weapons shipments. They're now back on quite quickly, Patriot missile batteries, etc. And he had that warm phone call. After 6 long months, humiliation in the Oval Office and other things, do you think Donald Trump is now finally beginning to understand that Vladimir Putin is not a nice guy and the scales are falling from his eyes to a point that he won't then change his mind again next week?
Look, I always was in the position that, first of all, Ukrainians, we are very gratitude for United States, because without help and support of United States, Great Britain, other partners, we will be in absolutely another position. We never forget about it. The second, it's necessary, very important personal contact. Sometimes it's take times. Plus, it's necessary to see to the actions. Because in politics, it's very often you can listen different statements. Look to the actions. I'm always from my starting to work in the office of President Zelensky, starting as an assistant of him, it was my dream. And I started to work that the relations between United States and Ukraine, Great Britain and Ukraine, France and Ukraine, Italy and Ukraine, Germany, Nordic countries. We have diplomatic relations, but we didn't have real relations, friends and partners, which we need. And this is the great role of President Zelensky, that he is able to build incredible personal relations with the world leaders. And this is the great why I mentioned about the conversation between President Zelensky and President Trump. It was not just, I wanted to say just for good words, it's great. It was great because very constructive, very concrete, very productive. President Trump very deeply understand the situations. President Zelensky, explain and answer to the very concrete questions. And we can see results.
But the concrete results have to result in the delivery of weapons. And we know that the Biden package runs out at some point this summer. Is one of the measures of the success of this diplomacy, of this relationships, a renewal of offensive weapon supplies from the US to Ukraine?
President Zelensky and President Trump discussed, and we know that team of administration work very hardly to looking for the Ukraine and new systems of the air defense, which is extremely important for us. And this is the fact. About the new packages of the weapons, yes, it was, but now we have not problems, and you have the official statements of White House and the State Department that the packages which we are waiting, it's delivering. Plus, President Zelensky discussed and proposed to President Trump big military deal that Ukraine, with the help of the European partners, ready to buy the new packages of the weapons. And now it's then the Americans and other partners see that Putin don't want to stop. It's necessary to increase sanctions. It's necessary to strengthening Ukraine to be able to defend and to be strong.
Yeah.
So on that act, the Sanctioning Russia Act, the bill from Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal, in your view, is that the single most important thing Donald Trump can do, to sign that, put that into law, to pressure Russia into ending this war?
It will be impossible to start this procedure without the support of the White House. It's mean that, of course, I hope that in the right moment, the President Trump will be able to sign this bill. And I'm quite optimistic about it.
If President Trump signs this bill, how quickly could the war end? Because you already talked about the pressure on Russia's economy.
The results will be just up to the end of this year.
So the war would finish by the end of the year if he signs the bill.
It's difficult. I'm sure that it's created very strong atmosphere which will be pressing to Putin. He lost huge money. And plus, it will be pressing because about secondary sanctions. It will be pressing and for the country who will be buy Russian oil.
Yeah. We've been talking a lot about the United States, but of course, this is a war in Europe, and Europe has to play its part in this. We've heard over the last 3 years endless repetitions of this phrase, "We are with Ukraine for as long as it takes." But the problem with that strategy is it doesn't deliver as much as it takes or as fast as it takes. What more would you like to see Europe do, particularly as the US does begin to reprioritize some of its commitments and inevitably focus on the Indo-Pacific?
First of all, again, necessary to be very grateful. And many countries in the Europe done and doing a lot of. Europe understood that it's not just about Ukraine, because never any dictator stop himself. And now maybe how they didn't realize many years before how it's dangerous for all of us.
It's hard not to be enormously impressed by what you have done in terms of developing a drone industry and being as innovative as Ukraine has. I do hope that a significant part of the future will be co-production, co-development, and armed forces across Europe learning from Ukraine. There is one tangible expression of support that hasn't yet happened, which is stationing, positioning, deploying Western troops, European troops into Western Ukraine. There's discussions of the coalition of the willing, but that assumes a ceasefire. Would you like to see Western troops helping support Ukraine from the West, from Western being positioned in Ukraine?
It's still on the table, and this is discussing. We don't want to involve our partners in the war. And this is the questions: how, when, which number. Yeah. It's still on the table. It's still negotiating. It's important to have a backstop of United States, and I think we will be successful in this discussion.
You think the United States, President Trump, will agree to air power to back up the coalition of the willing?
Look, we have good dynamics, and we have very good signal that Special Envoy was present in the last meetings. And everybody was very happy, and we will continue this.
But the hard practicality is you'll have no coalition of the willing that would have any effect at all without US air power. And you can't say for sure whether Donald Trump will agree to that.
Look, it's work like, Europe recognized that necessary to be more strong. Now, when President Trump was so successful together with the NATO countries about increasing the expenditures for security, it's look like everybody in the same line, and everybody understand that it's more successful to work together.
I want to ask you about China. So we saw the SBU arrested 2 Chinese spies this week, spying on your missile technology. We know what Foreign Minister Wang Yi said to Kaja Kallas last week, that President Xi cannot accept Russia losing the war. China has technically a neutral position on the war, but do you fear that as this goes on, ever more so, China is actually becoming an ever stronger military ally of Russia?
I can answer in following way. When I had the meetings together with Minister Sibiga, with Wang Yi, I said to him, look, I'm finished the diplomatic institute, but I permit myself to be not very formal. And if I can say that, look, you declared that you are neutral in this war, I have just one question. How much time President Xi was visited to Russia? How much time you host President Putin in China? An answer to me, please. How much time you invited President Zelensky or President Xi coming to Ukraine? If it's possible to be neutral in such circumstances, please think about it. We still think that China can play a very important role. Important role to stop this war. But I think it's not enough what we really see. Because without this support to Russia from China, for Russia will be more and more difficult to be, because Russia depends on China. I think it's time for meeting in the high level between President Xi and President Zelensky. It's important because practically all the leaders from the country who is in such neutral positions visited to Ukraine and have the personal meetings. Never, it's strange that never President Xi meet with President Zelensky.
Let's see.
I think it's time.
Let's see if they accept your invitation. Finally, from me, I want to talk about you personally, because the more this war has gone on, you are working incredibly hard. You look tired. Everyone in Kyiv looks tired. You've received criticism quite a lot from your political opponents. You've been called divisive. You've been called an unelected chief minister in all but name. How difficult is it for you to take that sort of personal criticism about the job that you do for President Zelensky?
Look, we are living not in Russia. We are living in democracy society. It's absolutely normal that the people have the different opinion. Some agree, some disagree with some decisions. I think it's the most important to say the truth. It's important for power that there is some second opinion. For me, it's important, first of all, especially now during the war, that this will be true. I think if any critics, any suggestions, it's help us to go to our goal. Nothing exists more important than this goal, because it's about our life, it's about life of our family.
So criticism of you personally you find useful?
I'm ready to meet. I'm ready to listen. I of course, I'm a busy person, but I found the time, and I'm very happy that a lot of my critics, to whom I have the opportunity to meet, to explain, to listen, we now have very good respect relationship. It's not mean that they change and they can still have some another opinion, but I know that these people, as me, they want the best for my country.
Mr. Yermak, your time is precious and you've been extremely generous with it. And I just wanted to bring this to a close. Tom has been asking you a series of journalistic questions. I just wanted to say, from my perspective as a general, and you know that at the start of this war, we had to give much of our equipment away to the Ukrainian army to help you survive in those first few months. It was never an issue that was in doubt. The whole of the British Army was behind Ukraine, and as we've watched what you have achieved over the last 3 years, there are three things I think that stand out that really make us admire you. The first is the leadership. You don't win wars without leaders at every level, whether it's political leaders or military leaders, and you have grown a generation of extraordinary leaders. The second is innovation and adaptability. Armies that can't adapt are armies that lose, and the way that Ukraine has adapted to overcome all of the challenges that Russia has thrown at it, I think will go down in history as one of the most exemplary. But by far the most important component of any war is willpower and morale and determination and grit and courage. And Ukraine has shown that to a degree that I think will inspire us for generations to come.
Thank you very much, and thank you for these words. This is so great. I'm really very happy. And little bit added for your questions, it's still I say about, of course, our hero military, but also because I know it's important for you because you both are big fans of the football. And
You've done your homework.
Here we go.
I know that
This isn't going to end well.
you are Tottenham, and my very close friends, who is also represents with such dignity country, and I don't have a lot of time to speaking with him, Sergei Rebrov, who is playing. I know him long period of time. And from Arsenal, it's Zinchenko, who is, I can't say that he's close friends, but I know him well. He's a great person, and he's one of who is participated of United 24. But I'm very proud that in Ukraine we have such great people who is, it's the best ambassadors.
And we're very proud to have Zinchenko playing football for Arsenal. But what we won't do is make you choose between Arsenal and Tottenham. Come to London, watch both teams, and then make your decision.
I was going to end with Slava Ukraina at the end of this episode, but perhaps we could end with "Come on, you Spurs."
No, don't say that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your support. For me, it was a big pleasure to speak with you, and I feel that you are deeply in everything which happened.
Mr. Yermak, thank you so much for your time. We're very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that was an absolutely fascinating conversation with Andriy Yermak, there, President Zelensky's all-powerful chief of staff, and a key figure in the war. And for all his reputation for bluntness, Patrick, he's still enough of a diplomat not to come down the side offensive, which is better, Arsenal or Spurs. Obviously, the answer's fairly obvious on that one. So
it is to me, Tom.
We're back now in London. We're back here at Times' HQ. What was your biggest takeaway from that conversation with Yermak, Patrick?
The first thing he said really struck me. And that, if you remember, he said, Ukraine is definitely not losing this war. But I do think he knows what's needed to secure the outcome that he described in that conversation when I asked him about what victory looked like. And I guess the first thing that came out for me was that you only deliver that outcome through a combination of continued military pressure, he said stabilizing the front line, but also taking the fight to Russia in its depth. But crucially, it's all about economic pressure. And the combined package of sanctions from Europe and from the US will be absolutely central to getting Putin to realize that this fight can't be won. I think the other thing that we both took away from our time in Kyiv, and certainly from Yermak, was just how undiminished Ukraine's will is. I mean, they are exhausted, we've seen that, but there is a real combination between that resolve and exhaustion. And I was really moved by that line that he came up with. We have not another land. We have not another country. They know what the consequences of defeat look like because they only have to look at the occupied territories.
Yeah, I was really struck by that too. And I think Yermak's description really of how tired they are, and yes, you talk to people on the streets of Kyiv as we did, but they're not in any way undetermined to continue. Almost more determined the more Russia throws at them. Extraordinary determination.
Yeah, no, their determination is unmatched. And I guess the third thing I took away from Yermak was an extraordinary insight into the pressure that you face and the exceptional, almost superhuman skills it takes to be a wartime leader at this scale. I mean, first of all, you've got to have the personal resilience and the resolve to inspire the national will to survive and to overcome after 3 years of war with the largest nation on earth. Secondly, you've got to hold your own political coalition together, through thick and thin, and in the face of Russian disinformation and propaganda, and indeed the credulousness of your most important ally, who's been ingesting that, imbibing that Russian propaganda. Then you've got to have the skill to forge a grand strategy using diplomacy and those personal relationships that Yermak talked about to build alliances and to persuade other heads of state to understand that it's in their national interest to support you, and all the while Russia's trying to undermine you. And then bear in mind, when you're doing all of that, you've got to meet the military high command 3 or 4 times a week, and you've got to provide political direction to the conduct of the war on your own territory. I mean, that is an extraordinary set of tasks. And isn't Zelensky doing it well, Tom?
Yeah, he is. And when you just go through that list now, and you see the internal troubles that the Ukrainian government might be having now, you can kind of understand it really, I suppose, can't you?
Yeah, and the final thing I took away, and I think you did as well, from everybody we spoke to, is just how universal and deep the gratitude is to the UK, and the UK in particular, because we have been a constant ally. We haven't given as much as we could and we should, but the contribution that we're making, whether it's in political contribution, whether it's in diplomacy, or the military contribution, which we can't talk about, is unbelievably highly valued, and we should be proud of it.
Well, I too was struck by Andriy Yermak's opening words. We're not losing this war. He also didn't say we're winning this war, because it's quite palpable that Ukraine isn't winning this war. They're just about holding the line. They're still losing a bit of territory to Russia, but he made the point to us, 0.3% of territory gained by Russia, of Ukraine's total territory gained by Russia. So I don't think you can really put that down to a Russian victory either. But the other thing I was really struck by throughout the whole interview is it felt that every single syllable that Mr. Yermak said to us was, yes, a bit calculated for British ears and yours ears and mine, but really it was all about America. It was all about the White House and what they now hear from Ukraine.
And how he must have been scarred by that experience. I mean, what a chastening learning experience that session in the White House was.
And they've been on a learning curve for 6 months, haven't they? They've learned that the sort of moral, emotional lecturing or appealing to your moral, emotional better sense, it does work very powerfully in European capitals. It doesn't work in Washington, D.C. So they've changed their tactics, and everything was designed, I thought, coming out of Yermak's mouth to encourage President Trump to do what he's just said he's going to do, this extraordinary tough new package on Putin. And you just think back to February. I mean, what a difference 5 months makes. Remember, there was Yermak in the Oval Office next to his friend, getting 7 shades of hell beaten out of him by Trump and Vance. You've got no cards. Stop trying to start World War III. What are you doing? Not wear a suit. Get out of my White House. I mean, it was brutal. And now look where they are with Trump. As Yermak said, they're talking exactly the same language for the first time. It's taken a bit of time, but they've got there. And it feels to me now that they're placing really all their cards now in Trump's new plan for peace. And perhaps, you could ask, what else can they really do in the time they've got left? So what Trump did, though, this week, absolutely fascinating pivot.
Yeah, so after giving Zelensky so much hell, why do you think that Trump has had such a dramatic change? I mean, first of all, we don't know if this is going to stick, do we? But let's assume, for the sake of the discussion, that it is going to stick. So why has he had such a dramatic change of mind?
It feels like it's been coming for a few weeks now. There's that great Churchill quote, isn't there, about how the Americans eventually do the right thing, having done all the wrong things first. Trump himself has been quite eloquent about this. He was saying, well, look, I thought I had to deal with Putin 4 different times. I thought we were going to have a peace deal, and it never happened. So he's obviously getting personally extremely frustrated. I also think Putin's bombardment of Ukrainian cities has really backfired so far as it comes to Donald Trump's ears and eyes, because that intense bombardment over the last month or so of course they've been hitting Ukrainian cities with missiles and drones, but it's only intensified really in the last month to the point that somewhere gets smashed really badly every night. In fact, it was Zelensky's own hometown last night that had 20 different explosions in it down in the south. But it was Putin's revenge for Operation Spider's Web, for that brilliant SBU drone operation, Ukrainian intelligence drone operation, to go and destroy those Russian bombers, which we've talked about at length here. However, there's Trump thinking, wait a minute, you're talking peace, but you're smashing the hell out of these cities every night. And then he goes upstairs and he says to the First Lady, as he said in the Oval Office on Monday, he goes up to her and says, well, I talked to Volodymyr today. We had a really nice conversation. And the First Lady says, oh, really? Well, he just smashed up another city today. He just smashed up an old people's home. Interesting Melania Trump's role there. Who knows? But let's remember she's Slovenian. Now, that's former Yugoslavia. That is an Eastern Bloc country on the wrong side of the Iron Curtain under Russia's malign influence. So she'll have no love for Russia. Maybe she's helped persuade him. But also politically, Trump's under huge pressure from Congress. There are these senators here, Lindsey Graham, a Republican, Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat, very keen to push ahead on their joint bill. Trump's hand was going to get called sooner or later by politicians in Washington, D.C. So I think all of that has come together. But I guess the next question, Patrick, is, will Trump's great new plan, his great pivot, work? What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I mean, is it a plan? I mean, is it a strategy, or is it just more swinging back and forth? I think let's take it that it is. I think there's quite a lot of speculation out there, or doubt about, why 50 days, and does 50 days give the Russians enough time to break through? I don't think that's likely. I see no signs of breakthrough or collapse on the front lines.
Well, if you're just on that takes us up to September the 2nd. I did the little calculation there. That's a long time. I mean, that's a lot that Russia could continue to throw, not just at the cities, but in the Donbass, wave after wave.
But they're
of
into the
attacks.
4th year of the war. This war is not going to be settled on the battlefield. It's not going to be settled in Kyiv or Moscow either. This war is going to be settled in Beijing, in Brussels, and in Washington, because ultimately what will decide this war is whose side's backers have the greatest will and the deepest pockets. And for us, for Europe, because we didn't talk enough about Europe there, for Europe, this is existential. This is about our future security. And of course, it's about a global order that we talk about a lot on this podcast. So Trump and Europe, so the US and Europe together, can absolutely bring a combination of economic pressure and military pressure to bear to get realistic talks going and some form of armistice going next year. I mean, how would you answer your own question, Tom?
I think I generally agree with you. I think there are risks here for Trump. So if Putin says, well, whatever, do whatever you want on sanctions, I'm not going to stop this war, Trump then looks a bit weak. He may feel he needs to do something else, get deeper into this war, which he has promised he wouldn't do. He promised to end it. And he kept on saying in the Oval Office on Monday, this is not my war. This is not Trump's war. Someone asked him, well, what if this doesn't work, Mr. President? He got a bit ratty at that. He said, well, don't ask me that. Of course, it's going to work. There is, of course, the taco element to this. Trump always chickens out. So let's see what happens in 50 days' time. Will Trump really then go ahead with secondary sanctions, which, by the way, is going to hurt the US economy? Because what that means is we're going after India and China here. Everything India and China imports into America will have 100% tariffs on it. Now, remember, Trump's already got a massive trade war ongoing with China, which he's trying to diffuse now. This is the real kernel of this pivot. This is actually all about what the Chinese and Indians do next, because right now, you can bet your bottom dollar, Putin's going to be on the blower to Modi in India and Xi in China saying, well, look, I want to carry on with this war, keep on buying my oil, and let's withstand this appalling American bullying and put up with these 100%
I think
tariffs.
that's right, Tom. I think it will come down to that.
And they could then turn around to Trump and say, well, do you know what? We're India and China. We're big economies by ourselves. You can get a hold, Donald Trump. We'll take your 100% tariffs. Or they may think, well, actually, our economies really don't want to get into a trade war with America either. So it's what happens in those two countries. And I looked up some of the numbers, Patrick. The absolute economic reliance that Russia has on China is incredible. So 47% of crude oil that Russia sells goes to China. 38% of it then goes to India. But that's almost 2/3, 3/4 of Russian oil going to two different countries. So they're the countries we're most watching. So, Patrick, finally, Andriy Yermak himself, what did you make of him personally, meeting him as an individual?
I thought he was extraordinarily gracious. I thought he was thoughtful. I thought he was intelligent. He was very, very quick and careful to make sure that he was acknowledging just how much that Ukraine owes us and also owes all of its allies. And I think there's no doubt that he's an absolutely pivotal figure. But historically, there's nothing new in this. I mean, in every national struggle for survival, key figures like Yermak do emerge, and they are simultaneously admired and feared because they have to be feared, because they have to be extraordinarily ruthless and effective. And in the end, they get judged on results. So regardless of what you may hear about Yermak, I think I respect the fact that he's the man in the ring, and we should listen to what he has to say.
So I wasn't overwhelmingly convinced by his answer, the questions I put to him of, tell me about the criticism of you. Is it true? What do you say to it? And he sort of gave a conflicting answer. So on one side he said, well, we're not Russia. We're a democracy. Anyone can say anything they want. And then he flipped into, but actually, this is a war we're fighting now, so we need to unite against the common enemy. My critics can shut up.
But I think those two things, you can hold both of those thoughts together. You can have so I thought he was.
I think you die on one fence or the other. I'm not sure they work together.
I think he acknowledged that he was being criticised, and he, in some ways, welcomed it as feedback. But I thought his point about making sure that Ukraine presented a united front abroad, that there was a signal of national unity, was a really important one. You don't play politics when your national security is at stake.
I basically agree with you, though. I think you do need very tough characters in war to get stuff done, and need to break a few eggs. Then that may be what he needs to do. Physically, he was a bear of a man. We love saying that, don't we? There is no Ukrainian in this war who isn't a bear of a man. But it's true. Yermak is this huge character. He's about, I'm 6'3". I think he had about an inch on me. And he's a big old guy, isn't he? He must be, 18, 19 stones? He's physically incredibly imposing. And I've got to say, he was polite to us. He was charming. And it was really hard not to have at least some sort of sympathy for him.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So that is it for this episode. Next week, we'll be continuing with another installment of our series of reports from Ukraine. We'll be taking a deep dive into the really heartbreaking story of the tens of thousands of Ukrainian children that Russia has abducted from the occupied territories over the last 3 years.
And in the meantime, do email us with your questions or just your thoughts. We're really keen to hear from you. And the email is generalandjournalist@thetimes.co.uk. That's generalandjournalist@thetimes.co.uk.
Thanks, Patrick. See you next week.
Thanks, Tom.